What's up, guys? David DeSell here, your host of the Business with the Boys podcast, as always, joined with my good friend and co-host, Landon Troyer. And we just came off of, I would just say, a real feel-good episode.
Refreshing.
Impressive episode,
Yes.
to say
Yes.
the least.
And
Uh,
with a female nonetheless.
and
So
with a female. So again,
another female on the pod today, which is awesome.
yep, number two, it's called Business with the Boys, but again, the boys are Landon and I, not the guests. So any badass females that own a business that you know of that you think should be a part of the show, certainly let us know. But today's episode is with Christine Weeks, who was a referral from Missy Rowe. And Christine, again, is just impressive. She had a challenging upbringing that we unpack a little bit. And to say that she's successful and providing opportunities for folks today would be an absolute massive understatement. But Landon, what were some of the takeaways that you had from the episode?
I mean, where do you start, right? Like you said, somebody that had, just really is the epitome of turning a negative into a positive, right? Like saw what saw some, quite frankly, sounds like some shitty things and individuals in her life growing up, as a result, she says was part of a foster care system. And, we talked offline. She was like, I had an example basically of what not to do. And, there's a lot of times, people, if you're in that environment, unfortunately, you go one of two ways, and you either fall in line with those actions, or you do what Christine's done and you chose to say, yeah, I'm going to go the complete opposite of that. And that's really what she's done. And to, I mean, just everything from what she has done for the employees of her company is insane. Insane. I mean, when you hear this, you're going to be like, what? So yeah, the world is a better place with Christine in it, and the world could use a few more businesses and mindsets like hers. I would say that.
Yeah, I hope we talked about this in the podcast, but I hope she writes a book about this stuff because what she's doing is pretty cool. But let me properly introduce Christine and let's get into the episode. So Christine Weeks is a CEO and founder of Eleanor Creative, which is a brand experience agency located in Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska. And since 2009, their focus has been to create and develop brands that contribute to the greater good. And I think you can also put Eleanor in there as well as a brand that, uh, you know, is contributing to the greater good. And I laugh
For
because that's
sure.
a massive understatement. So with that being said, let's dive into the episode.
Whoa. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That mean you really playing with your life. I'm about to come and run it all back.
Well, Christine, welcome to the show. Before I properly welcome you, though, I want to pause for a moment. I have not had the opportunity to meet Missy Rowe, but Landon, you know Missy, obviously, Christine, you know Missy, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't without her making the introduction. So with that in mind, Missy, thank you. Hope to meet you one day. And Christine, welcome to the show.
Yeah,
Thanks,
for having
Missy.
me.
Well, let's rock and roll. So before we dive into, your actual business, which I will say for folks listening, I think that this is a episode in particular that you're gonna really want to pay attention to because not only will we talk through, Christine's backstory and what she does now, but I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot. I didn't tell you about this in advance, but I want you to sort of chat through later on in the episode when you're meeting with a company on the front end, like what's the process that you bring them through to help define their brand and their messaging and things like that, so we can sort of do a real life sort of consult in the moment. So hopefully you're cool with that. I didn't tell you about that in advance, but
Sure, no
that,
problem.
that's my surprise for today. But um, talk to us about your upbringing. What was that like before you got into the business world, so to speak, childhood, things like that?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. It's really fun to be here and just have a little break in my normal, crazy, chaotic life. So, I think from a young age, I really was just a never sit still go getter. I always like to say I got my start in business at the third grade chocolate sales contest. And I didn't really know at the time that I was a strategic thinker and businesswoman, but when I made a map of the neighborhood and I plotted out where like I could go to ask for sales versus maybe where my neighbor Tracy could go, and I really like took over the neighborhood and won the third grade. Actually, well, I won the third grade, but I got third in the whole school. I mean, that was probably like the moment where somebody should have said, I think she's going to be good in business. And like while other kids were playing with dolls, not that I didn't have my dolls, I had a cash register and I was setting up businesses on my, floor of my bedroom. And that is really what excited me. So I think early on, I was interested in that, but I didn't really have anybody guiding my path as far as what I would do. So after I graduated from high school, I really thought I'd be a social worker just because I had some time in foster care as a kid and really just some difficult moments where I had different social workers in my life. I thought I'd be a social worker, but thank goodness that didn't all turn out because I love what I do and I really feel like I was meant to do what I get to do today.
Remember those candy bar selling contests, and I was always conflicted with, well, I really want that Reese's. Mom, can you buy this for me, or do I take some of the profits and buy it myself and eat it versus sell it? But I do remember those with like the boxes and the little compartments for each candy bar, and it's also cool. Thinking back that far, what's third grade, like 8 years old, where you're like, hey, I think that was actually the, defining moment in my life, talking about freaking box of candies.
Yes.
So that's neat. I'm curious. So I don't have, like, obviously, well, not obviously, but I don't have experience being in foster care, but I would imagine that if I were, that the cards would be stacked against me to do something of significance. And from what I can see on the outside looking in with the business that you run and the team that you lead and the life that you have, that you persevered through all of that and have become successful. And I'm curious to know, not so much about the ins and outs of that particular experience, but was there a moment in time where you were like, this is going to define me for the better or for the worse, and it's up to me? Or like, how did you make sure that you didn't get stuck in the system, so to speak, and become a statistic?
Yeah, I think the unique part of my life is I always had people rallying around me, and I always had really good mentors and people giving me opportunities to work. So at a young age, if my, mom one year couldn't afford dance lessons, my dance teacher allowed me to clean the dance studio, scrub the toilets, to take dance lessons. I wanted to go to a cheer camp, and I couldn't afford to go to the cheer camp, and my neighbor came over and she said, well, if you babysit my kids all summer, I'll do the $150 cheer camp deposit. And so people consistently gave me opportunities to work. I think one of the biggest defining moments was I was a senior in high school, obviously in foster homes at the time, working some overnights at Happy Chef. And, the school administrators, I'm doing this while I'm also, just so you know, simultaneously like student council president. I have, innate leadership abilities.
The overachiever. I love it.
But, the school came together.
David and I, neither one were that. So
it's like, how can we help Christine while she's going, having some difficult family situations? So I was able to be in a class where kind of kids that needed to work. So we would go to school till noon and then we could work the rest of the day. And so then they found a woman named Sally Hansen, who I just adore. She ran a bookstore in town and she then hired me. So then I could work noon to 5 and then go about my, teenager life. So I think I just had so many lovely people giving me opportunities to work. And I think that really just shifted my perspective. And from a young age, I was like, I'm going to do something with myself. Like I just wanted to. I was probably told my grandmother all the time, I'm going to be president, or that's just kind of who I innately am. And then I think people stepping in and giving me these opportunities really helped. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
Do you think, Christine, that it was somebody throughout the foster? I mean, I just envisioning, like I said, you being an overachiever from such a young age. That's awesome, right? But is that more of a something that was manufactured to kind of escape the situation that you were in? So you buried yourself in academics and work to kind of put that in a box over here. Like for me, obviously the drinking and everything else after my dad passed away was how I dealt with that, right? Or was it somebody within maybe the foster system or your family or friends that, kind of inspired you to do all of that?
I mean,
do you have kind of anything that takes you back to where you're like, yeah, that was somebody or something?
I think the term is overfunctioned in a productive way. And I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, it seemed to have worked out well for you.
I don't know. I think it's just, even as a young kid, like I just was kind of a mini adult, and that's kind of I took on that role early on as a kid, and it's just stuck with me. And I don't know, I think I innately did these things, but I also just, I was surrounded by people that were constantly encouraging me to make the most of my talents and abilities. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, for sure.
I'm curious. So, you're in high school, you're going to school, you're working. Did you go to college afterwards?
Yeah, so backstory is like when I was 5 days old, I was adopted into a family. And my adopted dad at the time was sick with Agent Orange, and they didn't really know that at the time when they adopted me. So anyway, from an early age, he was always in the hospital. And then when I was 7, he passed away. So there was many pieces of the puzzle we had to put together. But then what happened was I was able to go to college because I was on the GI Bill. So I went to college through the GI Bill. And obviously, as a foster kid, you got some money, but really the GI Bill is the way that paved my college track because they covered everything.
And what'd you do? Did you get a job after college? Did you start your business after college? Like, what were some of the steps between then and we'll get into Eleanor here shortly with what you're doing now, but what were some of the in-between steps before Eleanor started?
Sure. Yeah, I had to pick a state school. So I thought Lincoln would be a better fit for me. So I went to Lincoln, and they didn't have social work because at the time I thought I'd be a social worker. But they had community health education, which is similar in the sense of, public health, you're really helping the community, setting up programs, etc. So I did a degree in community health. I was, top of my class in mortarboard, all the things, but the job market in 2000, 2001 was super tight. So I worked like kind of at Cedars and some other group homes. And then I really was trying to get a job in my field, and I couldn't, and I needed to make more money to live. So I got a job at Von Maur, out of my field, selling cosmetics. So not what I expected to do with my life. It was a very hard moment for me, but also like such a good experience on when you think of Von Maur and like customer service and how they take care of their clients. So it was like, I learned so many good things being in that position for a year and a half while I found my professional job. So I did that for a year and a half, and then I got a job at Faith Regional Health Services doing healthcare market research. So that was kind of what started me into my marketing career.
I too worked at Von Maur, Christine, just so
Did
you know.
you really?
Yes.
You were selling cosmetics, Landon? It was
not in the exact same department. No, not in the exact same department.
Which Von Maur?
In Lincoln. Yeah.
What years were you there?
Oh boy. Well, I was in college, so it would have been sometime between 2005, 6 to 2007, 8, something like that.
That's great. I think I was there 01 to 02 or 03. So we missed each other. That's great.
We did.
Good Von Maur story.
Yeah, I didn't love it like you did, but it was a job. I worked in the men's department and, get yelled at by people all the time wanting to return shoes or whatnot. So yeah, it's great.
Oh.
Well, I had to Google it because I don't think there's any Von Mars near me. And I was like, Von Mar Cosmetics, was it network marketing? And then if I found the right one, it looks like a department store, right?
Yeah. Higher end department store. I like the clothes there, so that's why I applied there and wanted to be able to
get I got a discount.
Yep, pretty much.
I think my favorite Von Mar story was, I had gotten married at 20, pretty young. And then, when I was 22, we're expecting our first child, and Andrew was in law school. So we were like, making ends meet. So several of us were pregnant, and we all had Von Mar insurance, and we'd go to the doctor and we'd get the bill and it'd say $0. So we're all like, did you guys pay anything? And they're like, no. Well, they didn't tell you, but they covered your maternity 100%. So all of us women who were having, we're young and we're having babies, and so it was that. So that's what I'm saying. There's many good Von Mar lessons for me that I've carried over of I
didn't get the benefits. I was just part-time slanging polo underwear and polo shirts. So I didn't, like I said, I missed out on that side of things.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a really sweet benefit at a kind of a hard moment in life.
Yeah. Well, I remember in our intro call, and we'll unpack this further, you had mentioned that there were multiple instances throughout your past life, so to speak, as it relates to work experience, where you're like, all right, this is what I want to do with my company. This is the benefits I want to provide. This is the culture that I want to create. So we're going to unpack that in a bit. How long were you at the healthcare company doing marketing research for them?
So I was there about 4 years. So I was there in Norfolk, and then we moved back to Lincoln, and I still worked then remotely for them, doing healthcare market research. And at that time I had moved up. So I was actually doing basically doing physician marketing and helping when new physicians were coming to the community, helping them with their marketing plans and getting them acclimated to kind of the community and how, their new specialty would work in the region. And then someone asked me to just do some consulting for their business, marketing consulting. And that's when I realized, there's a need here in Lincoln and I can really help fulfill that. So I was about there, 4 to 5 years.
And because up until the marketing research position, you didn't say anything about marketing before that as it relates to experience. So was it just, I have a saying called FIFO. It stands for not first in, first out, like the accounting term, but it stands for figure it the F out. So did you just sort of FIFO? Did you read books? Did they have a training program at the healthcare company? Like, where did you get your marketing acumen from? Was it back from your candy bar days? Like, how did it all come to fruition to where you excelled in that role and were able to start consulting people with this newfound skill set?
Yeah, definitely FIFO. So the role I was hired for at the hospital it didn't exist before. So basically, they were like, we want you to come in and figure out why patients in our service area are going to other towns to get their knees, hips, and hearts done. And I was like, great. They're like, we just need to know where these DRGs are going. I didn't know what a DRG was. I didn't know what an ICD-9 code was. So I called the Nebraska Hospital Association. I worked with Thomson Reuters. I figured out how to collect the information, how to track the information, how to present the information. And I'm a figure it outer. So I worked until 3 or 4 in the morning, basically creating systems. And then I created it where I could understand the data. And then I would take it to their marketing team and say, okay, so cardiologist X looks like he's losing X amount of patients from these counties. They're going up to this hospital. So it was very much a fun figure it out time when kind of I learned like that's what I love to do. Like I love to take big problems and figure out the best way forward. And then I was in a marketing department, so I got to learn all things about marketing. So, at the time, this was like 2003, so there's no social media, so we're still doing like traditional radio spots, commercials,
mailers,
and I just loved it. I was like, I really like this. And that's kind of when it all clicked. Like I felt like I was meant to do this.
Did you
I have
just
a quick
rip?
question?
Oh, go for it.
Did you know Dan Allison at all with your background in the kind of social work side of things and then being in Norfolk?
Mm-mm. I was never a social worker, just to clarify.
Yeah, they own some group homes, one of the larger group home facilities. So I just didn't know. And then he's from Norfolk originally. So yeah, would have been about the same age. I didn't know if you guys had any connection there or not.
Did you just sort of rip the Band-Aid off and leave the healthcare company to start your business? Did you kind of double dip for a little bit, take some side gigs with consulting, build up some income and confidence to then ultimately make the jump? Like, I feel like there's a lot of folks who have yet to start a business that are scared, rightfully so, to just stop their steady income and take a bet on themselves. How did you make that transition?
Well, I'm really pride myself on like full transparency, and my boss at the time, who also now works for Eleanor, I just
That's cool.
Yeah.
People are asking me to consult with them on their businesses. Do you feel like this is a conflict of interest? And so, the business was an optometry practice. So she's like, that's definitely not a conflict of interest. So I had her blessing. So I kept my job because I needed an income. And I also advise entrepreneurs they need to keep an income coming in. And then I consulted, and then the clients just grew. And then it did become where definitely be a conflict of interest. And it made more sense for me financially. And I had her blessing. And so that's when I after I knew my income was going to surpass what I was making at the hospital, that's when I made the switch.
I know some people say, which I tend to agree with to a degree, where it's like, hey, if you have a 9 to 5, well, that's, hold on, quick math, 8 hours a day. You have, in theory, another 8 hours to work on something else, and then 8 hours of sleep. And obviously it doesn't work perfectly like that. But how do you view your or can you unpack your transition? Like, were you working an astronomical amount of hours to make it work? Like, were you investing more time to then free up time to be able to get rid of the job? Or how did you balance both your day-to-day job that you were committed to while building this thing on the side without burning yourself out?
So I had gone down with the hospital. As I was consulting more, I kind of scaled my hours back down. So I was probably maybe doing 24 hours at the time.
Seems like they are pretty flexible and reasonable with you. It's a nice setup.
Well, I also should say, when I left Norfolk, I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I was pregnant with twins. So
I have a
I
question. Were you, sorry to interject, were you like, hey, let's have one more kid so we'll be done at 3, and then you got surprised with twins, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think we wanted a large family at the time. And then I was so excited. I always wanted twins. So I was like
Okay.
Nice.
super
That's,
excited.
yeah. I feel like it goes one of two ways. You're either really excited or like, oh shit.
Yeah. Andrew and Andrew and I are divorced now. We have a great relationship, but we're married 16 years. So Andrew, father of the twins, was not as excited as I was. He was pale white. I mean, he just went from like full color to
Like the curtain dropped over him.
yeah. So when I was in Norfolk before we left, I was working full time. Then was through the pregnancy and we moved back. We moved back when I was like 30 weeks pregnant with the twins. Then I knew I needed to go down to like 24. So then the first year is kind of after they were born is when I was really starting the business as well. It's kind of how the timing worked out. So I was like part-time and then I could do that. And then I was also racing for little kids.
Yeah,
Sounds like a lot.
There's some time management as a necessity at that stage, it sounds like.
Yeah, I didn't sleep a whole lot, but
No, I don't imagine.
yeah.
And I'm assuming Andrew was in the law side of things at that point in time and probably working in an actual firm and not obviously from the house. And
Yeah,
so
he
fell
was
on you.
yeah, he was a public defender and very stressful job.
Yes. Pretty
And
thankless
so
job.
then I think maybe when the twins were 6 months old, then I hired somebody to come in and help me like a little bit. And then obviously as my business grew, I had a lot more help as my resources grew too.
It's awesome.
I imagine that was served as a sense of inspiration and motivation to crush it so that you could get help at home to further grow and have an impact on the clients that you work with, and ultimately then grow the team so that you freed up time on that end as well, so you could properly run the business and be a mom and be present in both instances, which was probably still a struggle and may still be a struggle to a degree, like doing both. But I would imagine it served as inspiration and motivation to leverage both the business side and your personal life side. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think my personality is such where I'm really focused on the task at hand. So I had this, it started with this one client with several locations, and like I just focused on doing a good job for them. And then I had another client. And so I think as my responsibilities grew, obviously my resources grew. I don't think I was like, I'm never like going out and searching for business. That's not my personality. I've been very fortunate that I've had just a lot of business come our way. So yeah, they just kind of grew as my responsibilities grew, so did my resources, and I was able to kind of make it all work better. Every year got a little better. So
that's pretty common in the entrepreneur space, right? Is a little stressful, a little tight in the beginning, and then if you do things right and well, then that's the path it should take, right? I mean, that's why you take the risks and you sign on the line for the personal guarantees and the sleepless nights and everything else, right? So that way down the road you can have the freedom and flexibility. So that makes a lot of sense. You say you didn't actually do a lot of marketing. How were clients finding you then? I mean, if you went from one client to however many now, I mean, was it just, were you putting word of mouth out there? Did you finally get on board with social media stuff? Did you?
It was
you
wild.
had to fill the marketing funnel some way, right?
Yeah, it was really word of mouth probably for the first 4 years, because I just didn't have the capacity to go to networking events, or social media was still in its early stages. I mean, I think we had obviously a little bit of
Facebook came around in 2004, but I don't think it was really anywhere advertising anything until post 08 stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, so it was really word of mouth for the first, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And then as kids got older and I had more resources, then I was able to get involved in more things. And that's how kind of really the brand took off.
We've been a little elusive up to this point. We haven't made mention of what you actually do. So let's spill the beans. So we mentioned Eleanor, and I know you have a story behind the name. So maybe start off and share what the heck you actually do. Sure. And how you came up with the name and the significance that it has.
Great. Yeah. So it was about 2008, 2009 when Eleanor got started. And really I call it a brand experience agency. I think the former terminology would be like advertising agency or marketing agency, but we are really focused on brand positioning. So clients will come to us, for example, in Lincoln, there's a healthcare, federally qualified health system was called People's Health Center. What was commonly confused with the People City Mission, Center for People in Need, all these other people names. And even though they were a federally qualified health center, they also wanted to take on buy up private practices to see private pay patients. So they wanted to go from being known as like the poor people's clinic, and also had a misconception that they were a free clinic, to being a clinic for everyone. So they would hire Eleanor to help reposition their brand. So with that comes name changes, logo design, website design, marketing, all the communication to kind of help a brand, grow and communicate with the audience that it has, whether it's B2C or B2B. We take care of that. So we do really a lot of brand work. And then we also have departments that do marketing work as well. And so we've been around 15 years now, I think going on 16. And we have offices in Lincoln and Omaha. And I think we're going to be at 20 people this summer. So
Congrats.
Thanks. It's a nice size, and we have a really loyal and good team. So, and then I also own Lincoln Kids Media Company and 55 Plus Media Company. So those are my smaller businesses. Eleanor is really the main company.
And talk to us about the name itself after your sip of coffee.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Girl.
Teasing.
Yeah, Eleanor was my grandmother. So like I said, I was adopted and was adopted into the Opliger family, and really like the best gift the universe could give me. So I had, there was me and my brother, and then there were 2 other cousins. So there's only 4 kids, and I was the only granddaughter. And I spent a ton of time with my grandmother. She was just the most consistent, kind. I just call her ordinary. There was nothing flashy about her. She just loved people well, was honest with people. And I think because of her, I'm able to, be who I am today. And I also wanted a female name when I came into the market. I knew this was a heavily dominated male industry. I think the average is like 1% to 2% of creative agencies are owned by women. So I knew what I was getting into. And back at that time, people thought I was really crazy for doing so. And now it's like, people in Lincoln and Omaha know what Eleanor is. Doesn't feel crazy. It feels like a smart move that I made. But yeah, it's really to honor her and just to honor women who have really paved the way for us to be able to do what we do.
I'm surprised to hear that stat you shared about, what is it, 1% or 2% of agencies like yours are owned by women, because I feel like women are way more creative than at least Landon.
I would second that for sure, brother. I would second that.
Like I think about so my wife Kennedy, she's in marketing, and like the shit that she comes up with, I'm like, how do you even think of that? Or I'll like describe something to her, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I can't put pen to paper, and then she'll spin her iPad around and be like this, and I'm like,
perfect.
That's way better than I was thinking, and yes, that's spot on. So I don't know if Landon and I are just the only two guys that aren't creative, but I think most guys aren't creative. I would even go to guess that like if it's that male dominated, that maybe the guys own the companies, but the women are running the companies, because I feel like women are just more naturally creative. I just may be pulling this out of my rear end, but at least my experience with my wife is she's certainly more creative than I am. So that's a
Well,
surprising stat.
we do have, several men on our team, and they are outstanding. And I do think they're so creative and strategic in the same way. So I don't know. I think it's just how how women have been positioned over the years and not being able to own businesses like they, can do today. So
Yeah, I think we're used to that stat, obviously, or I am in the finance world, right? But it's you're seeing that change as well, which is a good thing. We've got, I think, Elizabeth on our team. She's going to be a rock star, in that space. She's working on her CFP and will make a great advisor. And I just think, there's so many successful women out there these days that a lot of them want to connect with a woman advisor, right? So that makes sense. And so, yeah, trying to pave the way for that as well. So
for sure. I am also amazed at the statistic of how many women-owned businesses, never get to $1 million. And I think that stat's also like 1% to 2%, which is
needs to change.
So
Yep.
we're doing it.
Yep.
When you started, you said you started Eleanor in 08, 09. Sounds like a great time to start a business. When did you make your first hire, and who was that hire in terms of like the role you were looking to fill?
Yes. So I needed a website designer. When I started consulting, I realized, okay, these companies need more help than just consulting. They actually need websites, be brands. They need all the things. So I was connected to Nick, who is still with me today. He actually, at the time, was living in Poland. Well, he still lives in Poland. He's from Waverly, but he lives in Poland with his partner. And so then we got connected, and he was a really great designer. And we have been working off and on together, I would say, over the years. I mean, the last, I think, 4 years, like he was an employee, he was a contractor, he took some time off, and now he's been, back with us for 4 years. And it's been, I mean, because of him and our relationship and his design skills paired with my strategy skills, we've really been able to create some really beautiful work for clients.
That's awesome. Now, how did you, and I just think about, I'm trying to piece together what you've shared so far. So you mentioned, hey, business was just, coming in. I wasn't really doing, my own marketing, business development in a super proactive way, which goes to show that you were doing bang up work.
Yeah.
But were you ever hesitant, or I shouldn't say were you ever hesitant? How hesitant were you in hiring people without necessarily having a predictable stream of new business, because you weren't controlling that process? You're basically receiving business over time. So as I think, I'm like, well, what if I hire this person, I commit to them, and then that spigot runs dry? How is that thought process?
Well, I typically would get a specific retainer, for a 12-month period or 18 months. And once I had that solidified and I knew I had this additional work coming in, then I would hire someone. I never hired someone and was like, oh God, I hope some business comes to my door. So that's how I've always done the hires. It's like, we have X amount of work coming in, we have X amount of money, so we can hire, another 1 person, 2 person. I mean, every time I hire someone, it's not just about the money, right? It's also, will they fit well with our culture? Can they do the work well? Will they be productive? There's a lot of stress, as you both know, of making that hire. So the financial piece is just one of them.
Gotcha. Talk to us about the culture that you've built within Eleanor. So that was one of the things I was most impressed and intrigued by when we first connected, ranging from the culture that you've built to the benefits that you provide. Like there were some particular benefits where I was like, really?
Insane.
Like
Yeah.
that sound like just looking over at my wife, be like, hey, grab a job application. So, please like brag a little bit about this stuff because but don't just brag about it, also share kind of the things that you did to put these in place or to drive the particular culture. That way people can, implement some of this into their business. But between culture and benefits, you're impressive in that regard. And I'd like to have you unpack that.
Well, thanks. I think growing up and understanding just life can be really hard, right? It can be hard because of circumstances outside of your control. So how can, your employer, how can your place of work really support the whole person? So I'm always thinking about these are not just people that come into office to work. We spend such a large amount of time together that I want this to be an encouraging place for them. I want it to be a safe place for them. I want them to feel like they're challenged and all the things, but I need to create some support rails to help them do their best work. So I think growing up in a single parent home, and my mom was working as a bank teller and, it's not like a super lucrative job. I really did not want people who worked for me to feel like they just were making ends meet. So I wanted salaries to be high. So across the board, Eleanor has typically higher salaries than other agencies. I wanted them to feel like if they needed to take their kids to the doctor, they had really great health insurance and they didn't have to feel like, do I have to pick between this and this to take my kid to the doctor? So we cover them as far as, their health insurance, dental insurance, good 401k. But then it's like, well, I want to go a step further in what's helped me. And that is having someone help me at home. I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have, I had full-time nanny after I could afford that. And then as the kids grew up, I really had somebody helping me with laundry and meal prep. So I do offer, we call it a house manager option for our parents. And that just really helps them with day-to-day life. If they need meals cooked, laundry done, house cleaned, I want them to not feel like when they get home and they have these, precious little kids, that they have to just be spinning to, get dinner on the table and to do all of the things, even though obviously they still have to do that sometimes. I want to ease that burden. So we do offer this house manager option. So the house managers are employed by Eleanor. Typically,
so you hire them, you vet them, do all of it.
Yep. And typically they're people that, they need a hand up. They need somebody to kind of come in and say, I see you're in a difficult spot. I know you're going to work hard and I know maybe they're interested in marketing. So a lot of times I've had people that wanted to get into marketing, did not have any experience. So then I would take them for 2 days and kind of allow them to work on some smaller projects to understand the business. And then they would do 3 days of house managing for our team. So ultimately the goal is to give women, typically women, it could be a man, but the opportunity, right? The opportunity to learn the industry and then also help our team that's growing with these house manager opportunities. So I've had, really a beautiful 15 years of helping a lot of women, whether they've, some of them have stayed at home with their kids and then say their husband left them and they had no job skills. I've had several of those women come to Eleanor to just get a skill set. I've had young women that maybe, had a baby earlier than they planned to, and then they couldn't get the job in marketing. So the house manager role is really kind of this twofold thing. It helps our senior people on the team, parents on the team, be more productive, but it also gives some younger people opportunities to get into marketing and really create a life, earning higher wages than they were able to before, and have a skill set. That's the thing for me. It's like, give these people skill sets to go on and be successful.
Goes back to the old biblical days. Don't give them a fish, teach them how to fish, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So, and I think that ties into my, upbringing of really people giving me opportunity. And I want to always say that I've been able to do that, and hopefully it helps people and gets them a different perspective and a better way of life. And then I would just say, we're just different in the sense, like, if you do have a kiddo, your first year of life, you can bring the baby to work. You get full maternity, paternity leave at Eleanor. We just try to really support parents in these young years when it's super chaotic and feels very hard. And then as a team, we really celebrate life moments. So we had someone on our team have a big birthday, and she turned 70. I won't say her name. And we went to Mexico for a week because, like, that's something that should be celebrated. We had this last week, we went to New York for 4 days. We had a gal that's been on our team. She's getting married. And we wanted to just do something unique and fun. And we also, just also a team outing. So it's like we try to do things where they get to experience life in a different way, but they get to celebrate these moments of life. Because so often it's like you go to work, you don't take the time to, like, really celebrate what's meaningful to you and what's important to you.
So no offense to our previous guests, and excuse my language, but that's some of the coolest shit I've ever heard.
Agreed.
I'm like touched listening to that. And I would imagine that the loyalty within your organization is bar none. Like, other companies can't compare to what I would assume the loyalty is between, I was going to say those 4 walls, but you have 2 offices, I think, so 8 walls. The loyalty that you have within those people, like, is probably
you're not really worried about the recruiters calling.
Yeah, I would say, it's not my intention. I'm not doing that just to keep them around, but they know I care about them deeply, and they know that, yeah, they are really loyal. I mean, a lot of them have been with me, some of them the whole time. Like I said, Jackie was my boss before. I have people from teams that I've been on before that work at Eleanor. We don't have a lot of turnover, hardly ever. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful, like, I'm really working hard to build a place that people want to come and work at, and they feel like somebody actually gives a damn about their life.
I feel like if I was there, like, the only way I'm quitting is when you wheel me out in a casket, and then you'd probably throw another badass party for that too. So why not?
Yeah. We do talk about our funeral parties, by the way. So we all have that mapped out.
I mean, we all have an expiration date, right? But it's like you said, you get somebody who's 70 working there and probably doesn't want to slow down anytime soon because they're having fun and going to Mexico, and let's see you in another 10 years, right?
Yeah. Well, it's cool too that in reading between the lines and, some of the stuff that you alluded to, where you've just spent time reflecting on the impactful moments in your life and what helped you get to where you are, and recognizing that you probably still would have figured it out to a degree based on how you're wired, but it really helps you get to where you are today. Mm-hmm. And without that, it probably would have been more difficult than it already was. And you're being incredibly reflective and intentional on how can I generate that same opportunity for me. And I bet you that if and when you do experience turnover, it's going to be because they go off and start a badass business because they were inspired and empowered by someone like you. And that's probably something that you'd be fired up to see if I were to guess.
Well, if it wasn't in my industry.
If it wasn't in your industry.
Let's be honest.
Yes.
If it's in my industry, I would not be fired up.
Yes.
Yeah, and we have had, we have had some turnover, but I do think it's like, well, I always think about don't burn bridges, so I try to do everything I can to support them. And we do have these people that have been at Eleanor and have gone on for whatever reason. Like we really do try to maintain and support them and, love them well. So for sure.
That's
Love
awesome.
it. Let's get a little tactical for our business owners listening to this. So when someone comes to you and maybe they realize that their brand is not communicating to the marketplace the way that it should, or maybe they were referred to you and they think that they're buttoned up, but they're still chatting with you based on that introduction. Help us understand, for a business owner, like what's the process that they go through, perhaps some of the questions that you ask them to get them thinking, like how do you extract the information from them for you to ultimately come up with a strategy?
Sure. Yep. We have a process that's similar across the board. So when we have a new client, we bring them in and we do what we call a brand audit. So we're asking them everything from a SWOT analysis, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. We go through kind of perception. So what do you think your audience thinks about you? What do you want them to think about you? What do you, we also talk to customers and we talk to their employees, which is you want to know how you're doing as a business? Talk to your employees. They'll be quick to tell you. So really we're trying to match internally what's going on with the business to what they want it externally to do. So people think, well, we want this. Like we want the people to know in the community that we're here. We want, to be the first thing people think of. And but then inside their walls, they're really not doing any sort of community engagement. They're not reaching out at all. So we try to kind of connect the dots between perception and what's really happening inside. And I think when people work with Eleanor, it's also like brand therapy in a way where we're getting to kind of to the root causes of why they don't do some of the things, like maybe why they're not spending money in a certain area or why they're not advertising or why they're not involved, or maybe they're micromanaging too much. So we do kind of internal side. We also look at externally what's happening. So we say we're going to look at the brand experience. So we look at the look. So what are your brand colors? What's your photography look like? What's the inside of your office look like? What's your website look like? So overall, going through the look and laying everything out and saying, okay, this either does or doesn't match the brand you want to have. Then we go through the feel. So what's the feeling you want people to have when they interact with your brand? So when someone calls, who's answering the phone and how are they answering it? When they walk into your space, does it feel warm and welcoming? When they go to your website, how does it feel? Is it like a little scary, a little bad user experience? And then we go through the voice. So the words that you use. So when you're talking to your customers, what words do you use? What words are you using on your e-newsletter? What words are you using on your website? And we take all those, look, feel, and voice. And then we're like, okay, this is where you need to be. This is how we're going to create the brand experience. And this is kind of your guide moving forward. So it starts with a brand audit, which is a lot of qualitative research, a lot of talking, focus groups. And then from there, that's kind of how we move on to build a brand experience.
Do you find that people, like, is your company positioned in such a way, and maybe it's both, where it's, hey, let's figure this out and send you off? Or, hey, this is actually something that we stay together long-term because beyond this initial piece of the process, here's how we engage on a go-forward basis? Is it one or the other, or is it an option for them to choose?
So typically people sign up for the brand audit to redo their like brand, their logo, their photography, their website. And then at that point, more than likely, businesses retain Eleanor to continue their marketing strategy. I'd say we have a lot of long-term clients that we've worked with for many, many years. And that's, kudos to my team for really caring about these clients and taking good care of them. But it's typically like there's one section, but then it usually goes into all the marketing implementation.
And we're talking like multi-year engagements, then it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Ongoing.
I mean, we've had some of the clients since we've started Eleanor. So, yeah.
So what is the continual value add? Obviously there is, because they've retained you for 15 years. I mean, is it just updating their brand? Is it changing of messaging? I mean, what all are you guys doing along the way?
Yeah, like a lot of clients will want to run different advertising campaigns. So we'll create a campaign and they might run it for 2 years. Healthcare clients might need, campaigns for their patients, and then they need patient education, they need their website updated. It's really kind of managing all their communication. So a lot of times it's like we function as an in-house marketing team, but we're out of house. But I would say we do such a good job of like blending the two. So people really kind of use Eleanor or retain us to do all of their communication moving forward.
Makes sense.
Do you have particular industries that you focus on? Is it industry agnostic? Any industries that you avoid working with?
Yeah, I think that's the exciting part of our job, is learning about new industries. So we have everything from Dorothy Lynch salad dressing to Massport Pumps, which is an international pump company, to TMCO, which is a large manufacturing company, to lots of healthcare clients. So we're really open to anything. It's like our like internal philosophy is, we want to create and develop brands that contribute to the greater good. So, are the people that own the company, good people? Do they have a budget to spend? So we really do. It's kind of like client by client, where we kind of just evaluate and see if they'd be a good fit for Eleanor.
Mutual fit. Yeah.
Have you read the book Unreasonable Hospitality by chance?
No, I haven't.
So
let me see here. It's that.
So Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Widara is maybe how you pronounce it. But it's the subtitle is The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. And as you were, and it's basically a B2C style, book. But as I was hearing you kind of walk through what you do internally at Eleanor, like this book was popping in my mind the whole time. You ever consider writing a book?
I would love to. I would love to. It's just, I think about it and I think I will, but trying to figure out exactly the direction.
So I think sharing what you've been able to build and provide and the impact that it has on your people and your clients is something worth sharing. And in fairness, this podcast is only scraping the surface of what you've built. And after our intro call, I was chatting with Landon and I was like, she seems pretty legit. I'm excited for this one. But as we've been able to dig a little bit deeper, I'm like, damn, I feel like you're just starting, and not that because I don't think anyone's ever, figured it out. It's always a journey of learning and testing and trying and failing and picking yourself up. But you're onto something pretty cool with what you're building inside those, again, 8 walls.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think the world, it's safe to say, is definitely a better place with Eleanor in it, and most of the workforce would probably benefit from some of that mentality.
Well, I do think, I think the language around work in the last 5 years is like, It's not your family. You don't owe them anything. Clock in, clock out. And while I think you should definitely respect people's boundaries, and I think that's what a good employer does, you should also, like, life is just so unpredictable. You should also be a place where people can struggle and you can provide extra support, and people want to be challenged and you can do these things. And it's not, yeah, I think it definitely is a better way to live, in my opinion. But so we're going to keep doing it.
Well, and before we start to wrap up and transition towards our last segment, I hear oftentimes if you want to provide a good customer or client experience, don't necessarily focus exclusively on the customer, focus on the experience that you're providing for your team members and the employees, because the way that you treat them and provide for them will get passed down to the people that they're serving as well. And I think it's easy to say that. It's harder to do that. And even when you do that, it's like, oh, health insurance, 401k, like, what are you talking about? We're doing that, and we have pizza on Thursdays. It's harder to execute upon that, and you've honed in on like what that actually means with some of the examples that you've shared. So I would imagine that the clients that you work with are delighted every time they speak with a team member, because your team members are delighted every time they come into those walls. And if they're not, they feel supported and free to just be however they are that particular day. So.
And I've got to imagine you've got a culture that if somebody doesn't fit, they weed themselves out rather quickly, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? It's like, let's either this is going to work or it's not, and agree to move on if it doesn't. So
yeah, absolutely.
Kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Love it. Well, before we wrap up, Christine, I have over here, so one of the segments that we do for every episode, and Landon actually shared at the onset of this recording, actually before we started recording, that got some feedback that we should probably take these book recommendations and compile a list, put them on the website. So
a library, if you will.
Noted. Thank you for the feedback. And
thanks,
BP. We'll most certainly work on putting that together for you. So, appreciate that feedback. And anytime you do have feedback, don't hesitate to share it. But one of the segments that we do is ask our guests a book that's had an impact on them. And Christine, you had trouble thinking of one because you are an avid reader, and there's been a lot of books that have had an impact on you. But the one that you chose is called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff, Neff. Tell us about the impact that book's had on you.
Yeah, I think I spend a lot of time, as you can tell, thinking about other people on my team and how they're feeling and how they're doing. But what I realized over the last 4 years was, like, I was so critical of myself and so hard on myself. And like, I never felt like I was doing enough for my kids, doing enough for my team, doing enough for my clients. And really, it's this idea of, like, how do you talk to yourself? Would I talk to my kids like that? Absolutely not. Would I talk to my employees like that, like the internal voice in my head? And it's like, no. So I really have spent like the last 4 years just trying to be nicer to myself and
treating yourself like a client. It's a good way to, yeah, I like that.
Just really like, and thinking about like common humanity. Like, we all make mistakes. We all do, difficult things. We all have hard situations, and just not to just be so hard when these like smaller conflicts maybe arise. So it was a great book to just to reframe my brain on how am I going to process and talk to myself moving forward. So,
well,
love that.
Sounds like a book I need to read. So you may have seen my eyes wandering over here. It will be here tomorrow. So thank you. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Well, if I'm a business owner and I'm looking to get some help with what Eleanor provides, where should they find you?
You can find us at weareeleanor.com, and you can just send a contact through there and somebody will be in touch with you. You can also find us online and Lincoln in Omaha and give us a ring. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Always checking my LinkedIn. So happy to chat with you there. And yeah, we'd love to help your business and really just think about your brand from the inside out and how to make it uniquely yours.
Well, we appreciate it. And Missy, thank you again for the introduction. Christine, this was wonderful. I think.
Yes, thank you, Christian. This is awesome.
Not only do you have a great business, but you have a great heart as well. So we appreciate you sharing it.
Well, thanks, David and Landon. It's been fun to be here. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to see you guys again and we'll chat it out in the future.
Yeah, we'll have another get together next time David comes to town, and you'll definitely have to join us where we do have a lot of our guests come meet up, and it's been fun to watch them all do business kind of together and get to meet each other. So we're looking forward to getting you introduced to the crew.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey,
for everyone listening, appreciate your time as well. Do us a solid and leave us a review if you have not yet. Like we alluded to with the reading list library, if you will, any feedback that you have, Landon and I are more than open to that. So do not hesitate in reaching out to us and sharing that with us. But until next time, appreciate you listening. Christine, Landon, have a great day.
Out.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That to me, you really playing with your life. I'm about to come.